So the next presentation is done by Mouhir Babacek. Thank you. He was born in 1947 in Prague, what was at that time Czechoslovakia. And Mouhir graduated in philosophy and political economy at the Charles University in Prague in 1972. He's going to speak to us today about the ways to defeat the secrecy surrounding the existence of mind control technology. So please, Mouhir, you have the floor.
I'm sorry, I'm not a native English speaker, so I will have to read my lecture. It may make it difficult for you to understand. I hope you will. In the past, after the Cold War, there is an obvious trend in the world politics to place the struggle for power above the struggle for democracy. This can be exemplified by the current situation in Ukraine. You probably know that in the recent elections, the majority of Eastern Ukrainians didn't vote for parties promoting Ukrainian membership in the European Union. All the same, the Democratic European Union and the Democratic USA support the war of Western Ukrainians against their Eastern compatriots, while Democratic Russia supports the Eastern Ukrainians in the war against Western Ukrainians. This is an evidence that in the contemporary world, democracy is not the priority for the power elites and financial entities behind them. The issue of classification of mind control technologies is part of this favorization of power above democracy. There would be no reason to hide those technologies from people if we were living in the world where democracy would prevail. The fact that mind control technologies are classified is the reason why mind control technologies can be used against innocent people. The governments are perfectly aware of the fact that once the citizens know that their governments are in possession of technology which can be used to control citizens' thinking and bodily functions, the citizens would demand immediate and verifiable ban of those technologies. To know that governments are in possession of such technologies is to know that democracy no longer exists. For that matter, our effort to disseminate information on the existence of this technology among people is an effort to save democracy, and the salvation of democracy can be defined as well as a goal of this conference. For the victims of experimentation with those technologies, the classification of those technologies is the major obstacle on their way back to freedom and good health. Once the technology enabling remote control of human nervous system is declassified, the only possible follow-up is the legislation banning the use of those technologies and establishing teams capable to measure and detect the harmful radiations and their sources. The victims targeted by those radiations will be able to demand the verification of the use of those technologies against their persons, and their torture will come to the end. The major problem is that so far only very few people are affected by those radiations, and they have no chance to prevail in the democratic process since they are small in numbers. There are several ways to attract the attention of larger masses of people to the issue of mind control technologies, and make lawmakers and government officials work toward the ban of the use of radiations controlling the functioning of human nervous system. The first approach is disseminating the convincing evidence of the existence of mind control technologies via internet. There is a certain amount of published scientific experiments proving that pulsed microwaves can produce effects in human nervous system, including auditory hallucinations and microwave hearing. This scientific evidence can be supported by information from the websites of Ministries of Defense of NATO states, which are engaged in the development of non-lethal weapons, including radio frequency weapons acting on human nervous system, as stated in the study of the European Parliament entitled Crowd Control Technologies. For example, on the site of the Ministry of Defense of the Czech Republic, we can read: high-frequency electromagnetic radiation disrupts the activity of the brain and the central nervous system. The effect is perceived by the individual at the same time as an unbearable painful sensation of intense harm and squeaking, accompanied by anxiety and uneasiness, depending on the precise conditions and parameters of the signal. Apparently, in order to hide this information from the Czech public, this article is no more accessible directly from the webpage of the Czech Ministry of Defense, though you can still find it on the site of the ministry if you know the exact address of the article. Further evidence for the fact that at least certain governments are in possession of mind control technologies can be found in political actions aimed either at a ban of mind control technologies or at their military rules. Russia was proposing the ban of radio wave weapons, which it considered to be weapons of mass destruction, in the United Nations Committee on Disarmament already in 1986. The only negative vote on the committee cast the USA, and so those weapons were not banned. In 1998, Russia addressed the United Nations and the European Council with a proposal for an international convention banning the development and use of informational weapons. Until that point of time, there were presented 4 bills proposing the ban of mind control technologies in the Russian Parliament. The European Union cooperated with Russia in the following year, and in 1999, the European Parliament passed a resolution calling for the ban of manipulation of human beings. Evidently, Russia and the European Union cooperated in order to prevent advances in the construction of the American System HARP, which apparently can be used to manipulate nervous systems of whole populations. It seems to be rather evident that the convention banning the development and use of informational weapons wasn't signed again due to the resistance of the USA. Quite to the opposite, they managed to convince the countries of the European Union to accept the development of non-lethal weapons into their military doctrines and abandon their efforts to ban mind control technologies. In 2001, Denis J. Kucinich opposed the decision of the US government to keep their mind control technologies and presented in the US Congress the Space Preservation Act bill, demanding, among others, the ban of those technologies. However, his effort didn't last long. After a long silence on this issue, in 2012, Russia, facing the danger that its nuclear weapons will no more pose a threat to the USA, chose the opposite path of action, and the Russian defense minister declared that psychotronic weapons are part of the Russian state arms procurement program for the period from 2012 to 2020. Those actions of governments and members of parliaments, together with above-mentioned scientific publications, present convincing evidence that devices enabling remote manipulation of human body's function and brain activity actually exist. The trouble is that if you gather this kind of evidence and publish it on internet, since no big media dare to publish classified information, your publication on internet is targeted by government agencies. For example, when I published the article, How Far in the Future is the Ban of Psychotronic Weapons, messages referring to my international webpage were blocked on Facebook as spam and on Twitter as malware. And finally, both my web pages containing this information were deleted from the internet. The Western and especially American secret services apparently didn't want to allow to happen in a Western Hemisphere an event comparable to Arab Spring. We would need a systematic work to expose this activity of government agencies to the internet public. It would mean to record with a camera the sites with this information when they are placed on the internet, and as well to record with a camera when they are no more available, or when the reference to them is blocked on Facebook or Twitter. The video proving this work of government agencies shouldn't be placed together with a new web page address of the text in question on YouTube, and the whole story should be described in articles published on the internet. To avoid repression by state agencies, this work should be done not by only one person or by a group of people. This would be the way to make masses of people aware that the state agencies are hiding from them their possession of technologies enabling remote control of human mind and body. Second way to fight the secrecy surrounding weapons enabling remote control of human nervous system is to inform the deputies of parliaments about the existence of those technologies. Most of them apparently do not have security clearances to obtain this kind of information. I have talked to two deputies of the Czech parliament, and evidently none of them was aware of the possibility of remote control of the functioning of human nervous system. Yet evidently, when they are not aware of the existence of mind control technologies, they do not feel the obligation to implement the ban of their use. Anyway, we know that deputies do not care for the issues about which the general public doesn't care. So the public pressure for the ban of mind control technologies is needed to make the deputies feel obliged to work toward this goal. The MPs should be addressed individually, and we should make sure that they have received the information, and citizens should be made aware which MPs were informed. Again, this could be done only by an organized group of people, and it should be the same group of people who would try to inform the general public. I believe there should be established a list on the internet dedicated strictly to this effort. The third way how to make the governments and legislative bodies enact the legislation banning the mind control technology and establish teams capable to detect those harmful radiations is to present the evidence of the feasibility of this technology to constitutional courts and demand them to suggest the verifiable ban of development, possession and use of technologies enabling remote manipulation of human nervous system. The problem is that constitutional courts usually are not authorized to suggest new legislations. At least in the Czech Republic, the Constitutional Court doesn't have this right so far. The only way around it is to file a lawsuit in the regular court, and if it denies the action, then challenge its decision with the Constitutional Court. The trouble is that to file a meaningful lawsuit, we need irrevocable evidence. Hopefully, we can get it with the use of various detection devices. The irrevocable evidence is the evidence developed in a scientific way. Most of the detectors available on the market are capable to detect frequencies up to 8 GHz. Most scientists experimenting with effects of pulse microwave radiation on human brain came to a conclusion that carrier microwave frequencies above 3 GHz do not have any effects. The reason is that the higher the microwave frequency is the faster it is absorbed in the human tissue, and for that matter it doesn't penetrate deep enough into the brain to produce there any effects. All the same, there are windows at frequencies above 3 GHz where the electromagnetic waves will penetrate deep enough into the brain tissue to produce effects on the nervous system. Among those frequencies are frequencies of the red light and near-infrared light. Red light is wavelength from 620 to 750 nanometers, penetrates about 1 centimeter deep into the brain tissue, and is capable to affect about 1/4 of the brain gray matter. Near-infrared light, this wavelength between 700 and 800 nanometers, penetrates normally 3 to 4 centimeters deep into the tissue. But when the geometrical shape of a wave of near-infrared light is changed, this light can be made to penetrate up to 20 centimeters deep into the human tissue. The fact that red and infrared lights penetrate into the human tissue is explained by the fact that the average wavelength of the activity of cell tissue in the human body ranges between 600 nanometers and 720 nanometers, which matches frequencies of the red and infrared light. There are studies suggesting the ability of near-infrared light to affect the activity of nerve fibers. To make the human nervous system more susceptible to be controlled by pulse frequencies of light, no microchips are needed. The scientists developed viruses which can make neurons susceptible to react to pulsed frequencies of light. So now, to make a human being susceptible to manipulation of his nervous system, you only need to make him eat some contaminated food or to undergo a vaccination. Just 2 examples. One of the pioneers of this research, Gero Hiesenbock, cut off the head of a fly and then used the pulsed light to order its body to fly, and it did fly. Another one, Karl Wiesenholt, made the mouse to run, making only left turns with the use of the pulsed light. However, red and near-infrared lights do not penetrate walls and other optical barriers, and for that matter, could not be used for continuous manipulation of human nervous system. As well, the red light is visible and could be detected rather easily. There is a question whether the same viruses which could make neurons react to light will make them react to microwave frequencies from 100 MHz to 3 GHz, which penetrate into human brain. If they will not, most probably there is no problem for contemporary science to develop viruses which would make neurons react as well to microwave frequencies. The frequencies of near-infrared light, which is invisible, is not possible to detect with the measurement devices available on the market. As well, there is a question whether wave shapes of frequencies above 3 GHz could not be doctored up to make them penetrate into the human tissue. Anyhow, extensive experimentation with the available devices should be carried out in search of the evidence of the use of so-called psychoactive pulsed microwave frequencies on human beings. If it is found, it should be presented to media and courts. Such evidence should be sufficient reason for them to demand the legislation banning the possession and use of mind control technologies to private persons as well as to organizations and government agencies. It is obvious that media as well as the courts will want to verify this evidence at the scientific laboratories. For that matter, it is worth effort to ask scientific laboratories for the verification of this evidence, even if before it is presented to courts or media. Many scientists are kind people, and when facing convincing evidence recorded on video, they may be willing to verify it using their precise equipment. Now, what convincing evidence means? According to various studies, the power density of electromagnetic radiation in the cities is most of the times no more than 5 microwatts per square centimeter. However, in an Indian city, the measurement reached 1 milliwatt per square centimeter. Most scientists who experimented with effects of microwave radiation on human organism agreed that the necessary power density doesn't exceed 10 milliwatts per square centimeter. In the experiment by Alan Frey, this microwave auditory effect, the average power density varied for different frequencies and pulse widths from 0.4 milliwatt per square centimeter to 7.1 milliwatt per square centimeter. In Ross AD's experiments with calcium efflux from nervous system, the effect occurred only within the range of power density from 0.1 to 1 milliwatt per square centimeter, or in other units, he had the best results when using the intensity of electromagnetic field of 10 volt per meter or 56 volt per meter. For the fact that power density of mind control frequencies is close to electromagnetic smoke in the cities, it is advisable to make the measurements of power density outside of cities. The measurement should be made as far away from cell phone antennas as possible and away from power lines underneath which the intensity of electromagnetic field may reach 100 volt per meter, and as far away as possible from high voltage power lines underneath which the intensity of electromagnetic field may reach 10,000 volt per meter. The measured person should be approaching the measuring person from distance, so that the measuring person could see and record on video camera that the power density is rising with the approaching measured person. The experiment should be repeated several times. As for frequency counters, it is rather impossible to find evidence of microchips in the city as well as outside of the city due to the overwhelming presence of electromagnetic waves in the modern environment. But there are caves or ancient mines accessible to the public where electromagnetic waves in microwave frequencies do not penetrate. Personnel at those sites doesn't object to performing measurements at their facilities. If the chip is not getting its energy from the outside antenna, it should be working still when it is in the cave or mine. It should be measured by frequency counter as well as by device measuring the power density, and the measurements should be recorded on the camera. The measurements should be repeated on the same spot in the absence of the measured person and on a person which is not claiming to be targeted by mind control radiation, and they should be repeated several times in front of the camera. The video recordings should be then presented to scientists who have access to electromagnetically shielded rooms, and they should be asked to verify the presence of the chip with their equipment. The scientific evidence should be then presented to media and courts. There is one more experiment which could be less effort, though it wouldn't bring out any objective evidence. It should be tried how much the experience of a person who claims to be targeted would change when it is situated next to a solenoid. When Ross AD carried out his experiments with calcium efflux from neurons, other scientists found out that they had to use different frequencies of microwave pulses than Ross AD to obtain the same results. When searching for the reason of this phenomenon, they found out that those were the variations of the strength of the magnetic field of the Earth at the locations of their experiments, which were responsible for the variations in effective pulse frequencies in their experiments. The explanation for this phenomenon is cyclotron resonance. For that matter, it would be important to see if the experience of a targeted person would change in the presence of a strong magnetic field produced by a solenoid. If the experience of several persons claiming to be targeted would be changed due to the effect of solenoid's magnetic field, this would be a definitive proof that those persons are subjected to the effects of pulsed microwave radiation, and the only remaining problem would be to find the carrier frequency used against those individuals. Another way to experience a strong artificial magnetic field would be to undergo examination with magnetic resonance, which usually lasts more than a half an hour. As well as Helmholtz coil, the Earth's magnetic field may be cut in half. The difference in effective frequency for Ross-80 was 15 Hz. In the 70s, the hair dryers produced magnetic fields of about 330 Gauss, or roughly 100 times the background field. I believe there should be a list created on the internet dedicated strictly to scientific research concentrating on the possibility of the use of pulse microwaves against people. Some 8 years ago, I have seen on the internet a proposal by Chinese scientists to develop a direct brain-to-brain communication with the use of the concept of non-local electron and photon connection. You probably know that this concept of quantum physics states that when two electrons or photons make an encounter, ever since the reactions are coupled, no matter how far away they are from each other. It sounds quite feasible that if the photons and electrons in two brains, or in a brain and a neurocomputer, are made to meet, the two brains, or a brain and a neurocomputer, will become intertwined. As we have seen in this lecture, the near-infrared light can be made to penetrate up to 20 centimeters deep into the brain. Perhaps this could be the way how to make acquainted the photons into brains and interconnect one brain with the other brain, or with the computer simulating brain activity. I am aware that to detect such a malicious act by some government organization is rather impossible once it was done. I wonder whether the weapons using unknown physical concepts, the development of which the Russians recently announced, include this concept. The possible defense against this kind of manipulation of human brain would be the replacement of blinded photons in the brain by new photons by means of a long exposure to near-infrared light. To conclude my lecture, I would like to stress one more time that in the modern times, these incredible advances the science and technology are making, the ban to access human brain by various radiations from the part of governments or malicious organizations or individuals should be embedded in constitutions of all the countries of the world. Otherwise, the concept of independence of a human being and democracy will be destroyed. At the present time, the major obstacle to reaching this goal is the effort of the USA and its financial and corporate allies to reach global power instead of sharing it with Russia, the European Union, and other democratic countries, as well as with China. If the human world is supposed to have a humanistic and democratic future, the struggle for democracy by individual governments must be stopped.